Hey everybody, it's Kneecap here, and in this video we have the state of Ret Paladin for 11.1.5. What I try to do is I try to do on every 0.5 patch, kind of do a little state of Ret Paladin to kind of give feedback, right? The pros, what's fun, what's good about Ret Paladin right now, and what can maybe be better, what can make it more fun, more enjoyable to play. There's also an opportunity for anybody watching to also leave their feedback in the comments below. Now, you can comment whatever you like, but, the good feedback isn't just like, well, I want to do more damage. Everybody wants to do more damage. If you could say, but what is good feedback is saying, like, why this is fun, why this is not fun, how I want to do my damage, because the tuning of damage is always going to change. So it's more about how you want to do your damage, how you have fun, that kind of thing. We're talking about Ret Paladin, or it could be completely about defensives or utility and things like that as well. So I think personally right now playing Ret Paladin is pretty fun. I think a lot of people agree. There's a ton of people playing Ret Paladin, which is always true, but there's actually a lot of positivity about Ret Paladin right now from the Ret Paladin community, and a lot of like vitriol from the non-Ret Paladin players, which is usually a good sign that your spec is fun to play when everyone else is kind of going at you a little bit. So here we are. I've had a ton of fun this season. Highest Mythic Plus rating I've ever done. Granted, that's just because there's a mount at 3,000. Having very good performance in raid, despite it not being a great Ret Paladin raid, which we'll get into that. But overall, just having a great time playing on my Ret Paladin. 8 mask runs. I mean, I feel like I could do any type of content and have fun doing it. Whether that's delves, visions, the Dastardly duos that'll be coming out, anything like that, I think Ret Paladin's really fun to play. So let's go ahead. Let's start with the pros first, since it is right now. I'd say my attitude's more positive. Let's start with the pros and then hit some of the cons, some of the negatives at the end that we could see maybe some improvement. And of course, if you disagree, that's fine. Leave your things that you like or dislike. You give that feedback yourself. All right. So my first pro I have is the Mythic Plus gameplay. And specifically, something I noticed this tier was the extra range that Rets do have. So Mythic Plus Rets have been phenomenal. We are almost in the meta. This is actually what I predicted. I predicted Ret would be right outside the meta for Mythic Plus keys, and that is where we are. Ret is very good in keys. Ret can push up the highest of keys right now. It is just outside the meta barely, and I think that's actually more a case of a lot of the high-end players don't play Ret in general, and DK is probably just like a little bit better, but not much, but just a little bit. Like having things like AMS, Rets are still pretty good defensively, but DKs are kind of on a whole other level there. And so Ret is right there. I mean, maybe you could also replace a Boomkin with a Rat as well, and they're right there though. Ret is very good. It's pretty much what I predicted Ret would be. Maybe not the absolute best, but that's also, again, people don't take this into account. There aren't a ton of super high-end players that have Ret in their repertoire because Ret was so bad for so long. It's similar to like a Feral Druid. Even when Feral Druids are really good, they have to be broken for somebody to get play it in the MDI or something like that. They have to be broken for that to happen because there's not a lot of Feral Druid mains out there. And so, if something's pretty close to it, they're going to play the thing that they're more comfortable with, of course. It has to be broken. Same thing with Ret. If Ret was completely broken, we, of course, would see it being played, but it's not completely broken. Not really at all, really. So, but the extra range thing is something I really wanted to hit on in here for the pros. So, I actually have done a little bit of Mythic Plus on my Warrior. Not very much, but dabbled in it. And noticing the difference in range between Warrior and Ret Paladin is absolutely crazy. To not be able to some pulls in like Priory are absolutely horrible to do as a Warrior, whereas they're very easy to do as Ret Paladin. It feels comfy to play Ret. Now other things like Demon Hunter, that feels fine. Even DK feels fine. They have a lot of stuff that can hit a little bit at range. You don't have to be right in melee range to do it. But Ret feels especially good in that case, and I think it's really great. It doesn't shine as much in raid for that specific reason, but in even like a thing like Horrific Vision or Delves or Mythic Plus, any of that kind of content, and of course open world in general, that kind of content, Ret is very much shining through with that extra range And I think it's a key component for Ret going forward, especially since, they said we have this extra range because we have low mobility. So if we're going to keep the Divine Steed forever, which it appears we are, if we're going to keep Divine Steed forever, I think we also need to keep this range. It actually is really fun. I've actually seen some PvP players say that they don't like it as much, that they would rather do a little bit more damage but have to be hit melee range all the time. Okay, that's fine for PvP. Maybe there's a PvP talent we could add for that. But when it comes to PvE, I'd really like to kind of keep where we're at as far as range goes. The next pro I have is Hammer of Light feels good. So Hammer of Light is a button that feels good to press. We love these in World of Warcraft. A button, when you press it, it just feels powerful. When I press Hammer of Light, especially, let's say we're doing on a raid boss, you're not going to see the boss's health move, but like on a, even on a Mythic Plus mobs or something like that, you press your Hammer of Light and you see the health bar move. If you press it in a delve, you see a mob maybe die. You press it in a Horrific Vision, you see a pack melt. And Hammer of Light feels good. It's a big button, and it just feels good to press. And that is great. So Templar in itself is in a very good situation. Now, there's also another thing that kind of makes this season a little bit more special than last season, and that's the introduction of the Divine Hammer. So the way Divine Hammer works is the ticks of Divine Hammer are counting as a holy power spend or whatever, which is then charging up your free Hammer of Light faster, essentially. Now, I don't know if this was a bug at first, that they were like, oh, this is cool, we're going to keep it, or if it was intended. If it was intended to be this way all along, it was actually genius dev work, if it was intended. But even if it wasn't intended, and it was a bug that was like, oh, this is cool, it was very good on them to keep it. Because what this has made, it's made a new talent, or a reworked talent in Divine Hammer, just works so flawlessly and effortlessly with a hero talent tree with the Templar. And it's made it very, very fun. Now, of course, in the cons later, that's made Herald of the Sun like basically unplayable. And so we will talk about that. But that doesn't mean we should get rid of this interaction. This is very fun. This is what you should be aiming for with anything. Where you have a new talent, it's a fairly powerful talent. It's not like OP or anything, but it also, provides a little bit of skill. Ret doesn't take a ton of skill to play, but it provides a little bit of skill. You want to keep your Divine Hammer rolling or whatever, and doing so is going to give you faster Hammer of Lights. And it's like this cool mixture we got going on there, and I really enjoy that. And I think this is actually why a lot of Rets are enjoying this season, is that Divine Hammer mixed with the Hammer of Light. And then my last pro that I wanted to touch on here, I already mentioned how fun it is, but I wrote this down again. It's just fun to play no matter what your skill set is in the game. So if you are only doing world content, you're probably having fun playing Ret. Even if you're playing Herald of the Sun, you're probably having fun playing Ret. If you're doing introductory dungeons or Mythic Keystones, you're probably having fun playing Ret. Again, regardless of which hero talent you pick. When you start to get into the higher end content, PvE, then you're going to really have to play Templar to really, compete, I guess you might say. And so that in itself is a little less fun, but then you're probably taking even more advantage of that Divine Hammer of Light situation. And so basically, it's a thing where, well, sometimes, for Ret Paladins in the past, well, if you're a very, very high-end player, maybe it was good because you were able to hit your execution sentence. You had to do globals perfectly into your execution sentence in Shadowlands, and maybe you could do that. And so you were having fun playing because you were doing this, a little bit higher skill thing, and you were pulling it off, and so you were having a lot of fun playing. But maybe everyone else wasn't, because if you weren't doing that, your damage was actually pretty bad back in early Shadowlands. And so, that the non-skilled, the less skilled people, not the non-skilled, but the less skilled people were maybe having a little bit less fun. Whereas in this case, because it isn't a huge skill, a skill floor or whatever you want to call it, to play Ret Paladin, like it doesn't take a ton of skill to play Ret Paladin. I think everybody could be having fun with it. I think that's a really good place for any spec to be in. And like a goal you should have is, okay, it's fun to play no matter what you're doing or how you're doing it. It's at least fun to play. And I think that's where Ret's at, and that's going to obviously give you a ton of points in any game, let alone this game, where sometimes people forget to have fun. So we talked about the positives, so let's go into some things that I guess are negatives, but just kind of feedback that I'd like to maybe see some improvements on. So for this tier, despite myself having pretty good performance and stuff like that, I think some of my performance isn't because I am playing any riskier or, you know, greeting more, because I generally don't play greedy. If you don't know, I always say on my channel, I always aim to get like a 90 to 95 parse. That's kind of like where my aim zone is. Just because I know I'm not going to greed. I'm going to press. I'm going to Word of Glory somebody. I'm going to waste globals healing people. Waste, right? I'm just trying to keep my team alive. That's how, in my theory, in my mind, everyone should play, of course. But that's not the case. And so that's where I normally aim to get parses in. And I'm having a little bit better performance than that in this tier. I think some of that is just, you know, kind of dealing with some of these issues with this raid tier, as far as it's one big issue with Ret. So for the longest time, Ret wasn't able to do, was kind of bad in Mythic Plus, because we could either do full AoE or full single target. They have fixed that problem, especially in keys, where you have a whole sample size of a dungeon to kind of make up for it, right? So you can spec mostly AoE and keys, and the single target's not as bad as it was before, despite being like full AoE for keys. However, on a raid boss, it's a little bit different, especially if the ads are not constant. So if it's not like Styx Junk Bunker, where the ads are basically constantly coming out, and instead they are little barrels that spawn on Reverb, or they're the little ads on One Armed Bandit. Those are a little bit different, but you know, just in general in this raid, there's a lot of little ads coming out. The bikes on the first boss, which if you're a Ret Paladin, you probably aren't even going out and touching, because it's just a burden to do so for the way Ret plays. And that is, we can't be on a boss that is like 90% single target, so we have to take execution sentence, we have to take our single target talents, and then also be able to switch off and do this quick AoE damage, right? Our sustained AoE is quite good. And you might be like, well, what about Hammer of Light? What about Wake of Ashes? That's true. We have burst AoE at the start, but it has been taken back a little bit with the 30-second cooldown and stuff like that, with Radiant Glory. And I think we kind of are exposed a little bit on fights like that. Whereas a pure single target fight in the raid, we do fine. Styx Junk Bunker, we can be fine in that, where it's like a constant AoE, kind of like play a Mythic Plus style build. But some of the fights where you need to do some quick damage, we're a little bit exposed compared to some other specs, just many other specs that are just better at that. So do we need to be the best at everything? No, I don't think it's something that has to get fixed. But I think this raid tier in particular, where you have 3 or 4 bosses that kind of fit this mode of where, oh, we're actually not very good at this. We're not very good at helping out on this particular thing, because, you know, we'd have to spec a way that's not advantageous to actually doing the boss damage, which is most of the fight. It's like mostly patchwork, but then there's these bursts of ads that need to be killed. It's just not the best thing. There are some fights that are better than others, where you maybe line it up with your Wake of Ashes every time, or this or that. Don't get me wrong, like a fight like Rasharan from the last tier, for example, kind of fits this, where Ret was actually a little bit more good at, because just naturally, sometimes your Wake of Ashes would just kind of line up into the ads, even though you don't care about them at all, or like for your parse or whatever for that particular boss. But yeah, so sometimes fights it just works out a little bit better. And then holding cooldowns is just kind of off the table for Ret in this current iteration. So that's a little issue I noticed during this whole raid tier. Another thing, it's just a thing to keep in mind on, again, why maybe we aren't, you know, in the meta ever. And again, we don't have to be the meta. At least not to me. I think it's fine just being really good. But we don't actually bring anything super important. So before we had the Ret Aura, it wasn't that good anyways, to be honest. But they got rid of Ret Aura, they gave Shamans their buff. And now Ret doesn't really have anything. So Ret Aura already wasn't that good, but now we once again don't really have anything. So what I'm thinking of here is you don't need to bring back Ret Aura, but we need something that's unique to Ret, or unique to Paladin, I guess. But then the problem is if Prop Paladin or Holy Paladin are good, those are like always brought over Ret Paladin pretty much, because they're so good at other things as well. So when they have something really good to bring, then it becomes, you know, a lot better to bring them. Now there is Devo Aura and stuff, but again, for this raid tier specifically, that was a Prop Paladin you would bring. In Mythic Plus, you're just forgoing Devotion Aura, you bring out Druid from Ark of the Wild instead. Now of course you could stack those, but you know that doesn't seem to be the main play. there. And so what I'm thinking of is something more like Death Grip or a Warlock Gate. And maybe specific to Ret, or maybe to Paladin in general. Maybe something that makes more sense for a Ret Paladin to do. It could even be something like giving Spell Bop as a thing for Ret. So Spell Warding, which Prot Paladins currently have access to. Something like that for Ret, for when Prot Paladin is really, really bad. Maybe Ret gets brought to do the Spell Warding. That becomes an issue because you can fit so many DPS players into your raid. Well, what if you bring... And here's the real issue why they removed it. Well, what if you bring 10 Ret Paladins and you just Spell Bop every mechanic, right? Then they have to make everything immune to Spell Bop or be able to hit through that. They call it Spell Bop because you get rid of Bop for Spell Warding. So you have to make every mechanic go through Spell Bop, and then the talent becomes worthless anyways. So that's kind of the issue, is stacking things like that. So it doesn't have to be that, but just something. I don't know. I don't even know what it would be. But just something Ret could bring. And if it was specifically Ret and not Holy or Prot, that would be better. But something Ret could bring that would make it a more fun choice to bring. Even if it was a niche thing, like a Death Grip, right? Well, you have to have a Death Grip for this, so we're going to bring a DK. Something like that, I think, could be looked at. That maybe that's like an expansion feature or whatever. But I think that is definitely something that could be thought about, especially since you gave Ret Aura and then took it away. Is there something that we could have that makes us a little bit more unique and a little bit more useful than currently? And again, when thinking about this, keep in mind that some of the problem is that just not enough high-end players are playing Ret. And so that's part of the issue of not seeing the representation as well. But you might force, and force isn't a good word, but force the people who will change specs and stuff to try Ret out if they had more useful things, are like, oh, we really need this. And then my last negative is Herald of the Sun. We kind of mentioned this in the pros shortly. Herald of the Sun is basically not playable at high-end competitive content, and it's for multiple reasons. So the biggest reason is the damage is lower, right? That's just the obvious thing. But a big reason why the damage is lower is because there's not the interaction between like a Divine Hammer, a good talent, and then like the main ability of Herald or whatever, right? And I think also it's Herald not knowing what it wants to be. Does it want to be a dot thing, like putting the dot on it? Or, this is what I have always said, and this is how I would fix Herald, is make it about the lines that come off of you and you burn your enemies with them. Make Herald about that. Make that do big damage or bigger damage. And then on especially big pulls, have Ret be one of those classes that can do like 30 million or 40 million or whatever, like a Warlock or whatever, right? There's certain specs that can just do this big pad damage. Make Ret have that niche or something, because you have the perfect thing. We're burning our enemies with these lines of holy fire, right? It's like perfectly baked in to Herald of the Sun, which brings me to the other reason why I think Herald of the Sun is relatively weak, and that's because it shares with Holy Paladin. I think there is a huge fear within Blizzard of having another Ashen Hollow. If you don't know what that means, in Shadowlands, the meta the entire time was Holy Paladin, Ashen Hollow. Because, especially in Keys, but some even in Raid, because it did a lot of damage, and it was basically a solo heal cooldown, and it was giant, and it lasted a long time. It had a long cooldown, but then if you brought, like in Raid, like 2 Holy Paladins, all of a sudden now you had 2 of them for a certain phase or something like that. And it was very, very powerful. It did big healing for Holy Pallies. They nerfed the healing really to the ground for Ret Paladin, so they made it different, right? And then the damage wasn't good enough compared to other Ret options, let alone other classes options for like a Shadowlands ability or whatever, a Covenant ability, I believe they were called. And I think they're scared of that. And because Ret shares Herald with Holy, I think that is actually the issue there. And man, I know maybe it's not fun to do it this way because it's supposed to be a hero talent, not a spec talent. But if you have to make, like, you just can't have Ret share anything with Holy then, ever. Because if your thing is, well, if Holy does too much damage, well, then Ret just never gets to do damage or have fun with anything they share with Holy. So you just have to make it do more damage for Ret and not Holy. That's simply what it has to be. This does a ton of damage if you are in Ret spec. If you're in Holy spec, it doesn't. Make it work differently between the two of them. It's not fair to have this other cool hero talent, Herald of the Sun is cool, but Ret Paladins basically, you know, we did play it at the beginning of the expansion, but we don't get to play it because it can't be too powerful. And keep in mind, we were playing it because Templar was just weaker, and they had to buff Templar and fix bugs on Templar, and make it stronger, and then also nerf Herald even more. And so, like, it's this weird thing now. And then with the Divine Hammer interaction with Templar, with Hammer of Light, now it's even, you know, more of a problem. And so, you know, that's just speculation on my part, the whole Holy Paladin, Rat Paladin thing. That's purely speculation. You know, I don't work at Blizzard. I don't know anybody that works at Blizzard. That's just my speculation. But it does seem that way to me, 100%. And I would love to play Herald and Keys. My dream, if anybody who already watches the channel or watches fairly often, you know, in the beta, whatever, my dream was to play Herald of the Sun and Keys, big pulls, just pad damage with the beams of light, and then on raid and more single target stuff, even like Theater of Pain, to play Templar with big Hammer of Lights. And then no matter what content you're doing, you're having a ton of fun. Now, is Ret still good at big pulls with Templar? Yeah, it is. It's still pretty good. You especially get to maybe do a little bit more focus onto a single a single target, that if you have your Hammer of Light always hitting that target, so you get to do like maybe a little bit more single target damage to one target, so that can be good for certain pulls. Kill a lieutenant, kill a important mob, and still do pretty good AoE damage as well. But it's just not as satisfying as the idea of having those beams of light burning your enemies. And so you pull 25 mobs and you're just searing them all with your holy fire. You know, that's just a cool aesthetic. And a lot of the Paladin choices seem to be made based on aesthetic. And so I feel like you're really missing out on that. And so you just, if you have to, and if you want to differentiate, if like the goal was to make it the way I saw it, with Templar being their single target or raid choice, and for Herald to be more of the AoE choice, you would just simply have to make, like I said, the beams of light do more for AoE pulls, but then maybe make Hammer of Light just increase the damage it does to the primary target without nerfing it to the secondary targets. Just increase the damage it does to the primary target just to make sure that it stays in that single target powerhouse role. And I think it's fine to play, you know, one for both types of things, or for all content for every once in a while. But it isn't like, as of now, you know, without any kind of changes I'm talking about, Templar is just going to be played for everything in the next season as well, right? And moving forward until Herald gets buffed in some way. And for me, like I said, I don't think it should just be a Herald is buffed so much that then we play Herald for everything. I think Herald should be targeted at what Templar's bad at, which is, well, it's not even that it's bad at, but what it doesn't excel at, which is absolutely huge pulls. Make Herald that niche thing for that, for Ret. You're doing huge pulls, or you just want to do a bunch of big pad damage, you want to do big pulls in the open world, you want to do big pulls in Delve, you want to do giant pull in Horrific Visions, play Herald, burn all your enemies down. You know, that's where I think it should go. That's just my opinion. Of course, you can disagree, and if you do, you know, give your feedback of what you want improved or what you like down below. I will say there is a less than zero chance that a dev could see that, and so it's a good, might as well, you know, give the feedback, right? Try to stay respectful. That's all I really ask for. As long as it's not completely disrespectful, you know, I don't really care. Whether you dislike what I'm saying, if you love what I'm saying, I don't care. So that's it for this one, guys. As always, I do ask you to please subscribe to the channel. It helps me out a lot. If you're already a subscriber, I encourage you to check out Patreon. And other than that, everybody, have a good one.